Did y'all get some sleep last night? No. I heard one yes. Where'd that come from? Thea. How did Thea get sleep and no one else? Did I look like I was struggling? That was there you go. Thank you. You're awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you, Gabe. Just confession. I can run a half marathon, but I have no upper body strength whatsoever. So, all right, let's pray. All right, Jesus, we love you. We just thank you for this time that we get to open up your word. And God, I just thank you for your word. And I thank you that you gave us just this precious gift that we get to study together. And I thank you that we get to, we have the privilege to study it freely. And God, I just pray even that we would just not take that for granted, God. That you would just reveal that to us this morning, God, that we would just fall in love with your word, God, and that we would not take it for granted, God. And so, Lord, I just pray just for a release of just grabbing a hold of what you have for us in your word, God. And so we love you, Jesus. Amen. Alrighty, so I've been real excited about what God has for us in this morning teaching time. And I was excited just a couple of months ago when God kind of showed me what he wanted to do during this teaching time. And it was a couple of different things that I felt like he wanted to do in it. We called it Unlikely Warriors. The first part of that was because I felt like he wanted to show y'all in it, as we studied the word together, that there's a warrior in you, as we studied the warriors in the word. And so I hope that as we've studied and we've opened the word together, that somehow, some way, you've seen yourself in these warriors that we've been studying together. And you might not have known you were a warrior when you stepped on a camp on Sunday. But by the end of the week, that's been my prayer, is that you leave here and you're like, I'm a warrior. And then the second part of that is that we've been studying the word together. And my favorite part about it is that we've had someone different up here every day this week, because the reality is that we all study the word differently. And so by having someone different up here every day, and my hope has been that you've related with at least one of us this week. And so that you've been able to, the way that David looks at the word, the way that Timothy looks at the word, the way that I look at the word, and the way that Robert looks at the word, hopefully you've grabbed a hold to at least one of us and related to it, and that you can be like, that's how I study the word, and you've grabbed a hold of something by the end of the week, and you've grabbed a hold of a tool that you can take with you when you go home to study the word. And so that's been our heart, and so I hope that you've enjoyed this morning teaching time. So for me, how do I study the word? I go through different seasons. I've talked a little bit about that if you've come to our teaching group, impact group that Robert and I are doing. But 85% of the time I have kind of the same season, and it's that I study this one verse at a time. And I'm a little weird that way. I realize that, but that's usually where I am. And I will literally look at one verse and write it like at the top page of my journal, and I'll just sit there and look at that one verse. And I want to know what God's heart for me is in that one verse. And I'll sit there and I will look at that one verse until I know everything about that one verse. And I won't move on until I know everything that God has for me in that one verse. And that's just, I just feel like that's how I relate with the word. That's how I relate with the Lord, because I feel like that's just my relationship with him. Is that I feel like that's how he speaks to me through the word, is that he has something for me in that one verse. And so this morning, we're actually going to look at the unlikely warrior of Esther, because I'm a girl, so we're going to look at a girl. The girls just, did y'all just hear that? The boys are like, oh. I'm sorry, y'all got 3. we get one, okay? There you go. So, we're going to look at Esther. Do y'all know where Esther is in the Bible? Anybody? Old Testament, very good. Do we need to do the Bible check this morning? Yeah. It's getting there. It's getting there. I think the girls still have it, but boys, it's getting better. All right, Esther, it is Old Testament. It is a couple of books before what? Psalms. It's a couple of books before Psalms. All right, so right after Nehemiah. All right, so I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you a brief history of Esther, but then we're going to look at a very, very short passage of Esther because I'm weird like that, and we look at a very short passage of Esther. Even though it's a big couple of chapters long, we're just going to look at a very short passage of it. All right, so quick timeline of Esther. I'm going to read my notes for this one so I don't miss anything. All right, she lived in ancient Persia for about 100 years after the Babylonian captivity. Esther was a Jew. This is important. Esther was also an orphan, and when both her parents died, she was adopted and raised by her older cousin. Anybody know his name? Mordecai. There you go. All right. One day, the king of the Persian Empire, Xerxes, threw a very lavish party. On the final day, he called for his queen. Y'all know her name? Vashti, and she refused to come. This didn't make the king very happy, so he removed her from her post as queen, forever removing her from his presence. So this left the king without a queen, which is quite an issue. All right, so to find a queen, we're going to call it, he hosted a royal beauty pageant. We're just going to leave it at that. And Esther was chosen for the throne. All right, so after Esther was chosen as queen, her cousin Mordecai became a minor official in the Persian government of Susa. Soon after Esther is in the position as queen, Mordecai is in the position as a minor official, and Mordecai uncovers a plot to assassinate the king. So Mordecai tells Esther, Esther tells Xerxes the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The plot was thwarted, and Mordecai's act of kindness was preserved in the Chronicle of the King. At the same time, the king's highest official was a wicked man named, doesn't this sound like a soap opera? Y'all like that? All right. He hated the Jews, and he especially hated Mordecai, who had refused to bow down to him. Because of this, Haman devised a scheme to have every Jew in Persia killed. The king was brought into the plot, and he actually agreed to kill all the Jewish people on a very specific day, because a minor detail was left out of the story, right? Esther failed to tell the king what? That she was a Jew. All right, minor detail. So, moving on, Mordecai learned of the plan and shared it with Esther, challenging her with these famous words, and this is where we're going to camp out for the morning. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. All right, and that's in Esther 4:13-14, if you got your word in front of you, right? All right, so in other words, Mordecai is saying this, Esther, what if you were born for this very, very moment? Okay? All right, why else would a Jewish woman be the queen of Persia at such a time as this? Must this not be God? Okay? So maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're thinking that's great. And you're thinking maybe we've looked at the word this week and you're still like 3 days into this and you're like, I don't relate to any of these people. We looked at Abraham, we've looked at Gideon, now we're looking at Esther, and I'm like, I still don't see myself in any of these people. But the reality is, you've been placed, and we can look at Esther, and you're like, I'm never going to be queen, okay? But, and you're even thinking, I'm never going to be in a royal position. This story has zero relevance to me. But I want you to hear this morning. you are royalty, okay? You are sons and daughters of the King. The crimson bloodline of Jesus flows through your veins. Not only are you royalty, but you've been placed in your sphere of influence, in your bubble. You've been placed there, just like Queen Esther was placed exactly where she was supposed to be, exactly in that moment of time, exactly by God, just right when she was supposed to be. You've been placed exactly where you're supposed to be right now, right when you're supposed to be. So Ecclesiastes 3:2 tells us there's a time to be born and a time to die. God decided exactly when you were going to be on this earth. Acts 17:26 tells us that God determined the time set for us and the exact places that we should live. Even your exact location is a part of your setup, a part of your kingdom destiny. So exactly where you live right now, exactly where you go to high school, exactly where you go to middle school, is exactly part of God's plan for your life. It's exactly your sphere of influence, exactly where God has you. And so you can relate absolutely to Esther because you've been placed. That's exactly where God has you, exactly where you're supposed to be. And so this should be significant to you. That the reality of this should be piercing your heart. And so this is what I want you to hear this morning. We can refuse to walk in obedience. We can cower away in fear from the calling. The calling, y'all. I'm looking at all the calling on all of y'all's T-shirts this morning. We can refuse to walk away from our calling on our life, but he is still going to accomplish his plan. Okay? But for us, that just means we walk away from the fullness that he has for us. Do y'all hear that? He's still going to accomplish his plan. But by us refusing or to cower it away in fear, we're just not going to walk in the fullness that he has for us. And that's not cool. That's not fun. I don't know about y'all, but that's like the number one prayer in my heart is that, God, I just want to walk in the absolute fullness that you have for me. And I don't know what that looks like on every day. You know, every day I'm just like, God, I just want the absolute fullness that you have for me. That's what I want. And so exactly where he has me, I want to be in the absolute fullness. I want to, whoever it is that he wants me to talk to, whoever it is that he wants me to minister to, I want to walk. I want to accomplish his purpose in the absolute fullness. So going back to Esther, can y'all imagine hearing those words? And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. How would y'all respond to that? Would y'all freak out? Would y'all get scared? So we're going to look, how did Esther respond? Well, Esther actually responded in incredible courage. So we're going to look at the word, and a little bit we're going to look at the word courage. But these are the words of Esther. Esther replied, "Go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. And do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." In essence, Esther is saying, I will stand for this, and if I must die for it, then I will die. Because basically, she's risking her life to go into the presence of the king. And so this is what I want you to hear this morning. Esther had a choice, and we have a choice to either do what God calls us to do or to not do what God has called us to do. So Esther had to overcome herself in order to do what God had created her to do and positioned her to do. And sometimes I think we're our biggest obstacle because Esther had to get out of her own way, right? She had to put herself in that position. So sometimes I think we're our biggest obstacle. So just to name one way, I think sometimes we convince ourselves we're not good enough. Even though we hear the calling that God's called us to, I think we convince ourselves we're not good enough or that surely someone's got someone better for the job. Do y'all ever think that? We talk ourselves out of our own calling sometimes. And so I think we put up this wall of protection, whether it's I'm a not good enough wall, or I don't want people looking at me wall. But we can literally protect ourselves right out of our calling. And that's not good. So there's one. So the word I want us to look at before I close is being courageous. Courageous comes from the Latin word cor, which means heart. So take heart, take courage. Courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. God always offers the presence as his presence as courage. And so we get to choose. We get to either take fear on, or we get to take courage. So with Esther, her walk with God was an exciting adventure, right? So she knew exactly what she had to do. She either had to walk in courage and walk in confidence and knowing who she was. She knew. She took on courage. She took on confidence, and she took on the fact that God had called her, and God had called her, and she knew. When Mordecai came to her and said, "You've been called. Don't you think this is exactly where you're supposed to be?" And she took it on. She's like, in courage and confidence, and said, "Yes. If I die, I die. If I perish, I perish." And instead, I think I might have ran the other way, and talked myself out of the calling that was on her life. And so that's what I want us to respond with this morning, is to know that Esther walked in. She was an unlikely warrior. She was a Jew. They didn't even know she was a Jew. She hid that from them. But absolutely, God chose her for that. And that's what I want you to walk away with this morning, is that the calling, she was the unlikely warrior in that story, that she walked in confidence, she walked in courage. And so there's a couple of questions that I have for you this morning. And we're going to go through them together here in just a second. But I'm going to go ahead and read them to you. Do you believe you're a royalty? Do you believe God has kingdom purpose for your life? Do you believe he has destiny for your life? Do you have courage? Do you trust him? So you get to decide how great your story is. And you may be the one brave decision away from your destiny, is my question for you this morning. And so no matter where you are, Jesus absolutely has you where you are. And so we're going to actually pray for each other this morning, and we're actually going to pray for each other. And so we're going to have a little bit of interaction time this morning, praying for each other. And before you freak out, I remember I'd known Jesus for about 1 week when I got asked to pray for a group, and I almost peed my pants. What level scare is that? 5? Awesome. All right, so we're going to be safe. Level 4. Boys, remember that. So we're going to play it safe this morning, and we're just going to do one-on-one time. And we're going to actually sing. We're going to put on some music this morning, and we're going to do Jake Hamilton's The Anthem. Y'all know that song? Okay, so, and there's some words in that song, and if you don't know how, if you've I've never prayed for someone before, that's why we're going to do this morning, because we're going to give you tools and teach you how to pray, teach you how to get in the Word. That's what summer camp's all about. And so we're going to put the questions that I just read. I want you to ask that to each other. Do you believe those things in your life? Do you believe that? Because those are truths. Okay, that's who you are. Okay, and then the words in the song that I want you can even use the words in the song to pray for each other. You were born for such a time as this. I am royalty. I have destiny. I have been set free. I'm going to shape history. I want y'all to pray that over each other. Okay, so you can even sing that over each other. You can pray that over each other. But you're just going to get one-on-one and pray for each other this morning. So you can turn chairs if you want to. We're going to just have just a few minutes of just y'all just praying for each other, okay? Can y'all do that for me? And then we'll go on to the next thing, okay?